this episode, we'll walk the path to lasting happiness with the help of America's happiness doctor. He's a best-selling author and a contributor to Mental Health Television Network, and he's also the president of the Happiness Center. Welcome to the show, Elia. How are you doing?
Thank you, Tobi. I'm delighted to be here. It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your presence here, and I'm looking forward to having a civil conversation with you regarding happiness, regarding how to overcome or even, rise above challenges in life or crises in life. And while preparing for this conversation, one thing that stood out to me was that you migrated from Greece to the US. And because of my own background also, like moving from Nigeria to Germany, I'm like intrigued to ask you about that move from, Greece to the US. How was it like for you?
It wasn't easy. I was 10 years old when we moved to Santa Monica, California from Athens, Greece. It partly was because we had a really good life in Greece. So I wouldn't say we're like the typical, immigrant family that moves to the United States. But what happened, unfortunately, and I grew up in a great home, great family. My mom got cancer, had breast cancer at the time. And back in the day, especially in Greece, that was almost a death sentence. So my dad and my mom decided to move to the United States to get better treatment at the UCLA Medical Center. My parents had always actually lived in Los Angeles, so prior to that, and my older brother actually was born in Hollywood. So that was one of the reasons why they moved, to prolong her life, which it did happen. The other reason was Greece was under a dictatorship actually at the time, so there was some political instability, and my dad wanted a society that was more stable politically. They both want us to get, really good education. And, my brother and I ended up getting PhDs. He's a professor at Columbia. Mine was in psychology. We were both really, really good swimmers. And Southern California at the time was the best place to train around the world. So there were multiple factors that played in it. But it was not an easy transition, leaving what you know behind, your culture, your family, extended family and friends and so on.
Yeah.
So my dad, said that he noticed that we were struggling the first, few months there. And he said, listen, I want to tell you something about this, big move that we made. And he realized it was big. He said, I want you to think about this. There are things in America that Greece is not even going to get to in 100 years, meaning the opportunities, that the education, the higher education and so on. However, he said, there are things in Greece that America is not going to get to in 1,000 years, meaning the richness of culture. Greece has this beautiful culture that goes back 2,500 years. The golden age of Greece, brought forth democracy and so many other things, really the cradle of Western civilization in a lot of ways. And his whole point was take the best of both worlds. In other words, no country is perfect. Greece isn't, neither is the US, neither is Germany or Nigeria in your case, but there are great things in every culture. And they kind of raised us that way. And when I ended up having my family with my wife, and my wife is half German, so she speaks German fluently, and half from the Middle East, her dad was Armenian. We raised our kids to become world citizens. Yes, there's Greek roots and German roots and so on, but really, and we travel a lot with our kids. And it's my belief that when people travel and get to experience different cultures, all the isms of the world go out the window. Racism, nationalism, all the negativity that comes out. Because when we travel, you go to a different country and you lean in and you eat the local food and you marvel at their architecture, you learn more about their history, their language, the food, of course, over and over again. And more importantly, you get to know the people. You realize that we have a lot more in common than what separates us.
Yeah.
And that's how I was raised, and that's how our kids were raised. And now we're, as we start to travel with grandkids and so on, it's the same idea. Like we're all world citizens, and we have so much more in common than what divides us.
Yeah.
So
I really love that term, like world citizens, like traveling around the world, broadening your horizon basically, and getting to learn other cultures. That's really lovely. It's really good.
Yeah, and I hope you embrace my dad's counsel to my brother and I, and take the best of both Nigeria and Germany.
Yeah. I'm going to do my best with that also, like, taking the best I can see from Germany, the advantages here, and also keeping or holding on to my culture, my values that are missing here, basically. Yeah, that,
Yes.
that's a wonderful advice. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And would you say traveling around the world, becoming a doctor, for example, having your PhD, having your family, contributed to your happiness, or it's just a part of your happiness?
Well, my family is the core of my happiness, actually,
Mm,
because I think in life, whatever success we achieve, in whatever capacity, there is no success outside of the home will ever compensate for failure in the home.
mm,
So I am the most proud, my 33 years married to my best friend, and the good life that we live. I think I told you before the show that we're about 8 months here in the US and 4 months in
yeah,
Greece/Europe.
that's
So
true.
that's how we split our time. Now that we're empty nesters, really proud of my kids and how they've become such good humans.
Mm,
Last summer I had the opportunity to officiate two weddings, so two of the kids' weddings,
wow.
which is awesome, and that they've chosen really wonderful spouses. And so for me, that's the real mark of success. The other mark of success, of course, is we all have a sphere of influence and impact.
Mhm.
And my goal, and I learned this early on in my life. Really, I had this maybe purpose very deep in my heart, which was to help other people and to leave this world better than I found it.
Mm,
So, and I think that's another one of those achievements. If we're all going to transition at some point. I got gray hair, so I'm going to be exiting in however many years I have left on this earth. I think I'm leaving this world better than I found it in terms of
yeah,
the impact that I've had on people's lives.
oh, that's
First as
beautiful.
a clinical psychologist, and then as a coach, but as a friend, as an international speaker. I travel the world and I speak about happiness and wellness. And so the impact, I feel like I've been given certain gifts. We all have gifts in life.
Yeah.
For me, I'm a spiritual person, so I feel like it's a God-given gift
Mm,
to be able to see the best in others, even before they can see it in themselves. I've had that since I was young. I would always see what's good about people. And then even as I was, their psychologist or later on their coach, to be able to convey that to them and my vision of who they are really before, because, usually when they come to me, they're struggling with issues and so on.
mm,
I have people like say, hey, my name is John and I'm an addict. And I'm like, no, John, you're not just an addict. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a friend, you're a son, you're a brother,
mhm,
you have your professional career. And yes, you do struggle with an addiction that can be devastating to you, but
mm,
that's not all you are. You're so much more than that.
mm,
And as I, got to know people and gave them the tools and then held them accountable because they do all the work. I just gave them the tools, right?
mhm,
And they healed and they sobered up and then they created a wonderful life themselves. They would come back and say, the first time when we met, when you said that to me, I didn't believe you.
mm,
Nobody has ever said that to me. I saw myself through my weaknesses. I saw myself through my mistakes that I made. I saw myself through, the consequences of my addiction
mm,
that destroyed perhaps my most intimate relationships or lost my job or got into legal problems. That's how I viewed myself. And you saw something in me that I could not see at the time. And I thought, he's just saying that. He doesn't know who I am, but I could see it, and I was able to convey that to them. And then eventually, as they got better, they were able to embrace their higher self, if that makes
mm,
any sense. And that's been a
yeah,
big contribution. And that makes me so happy. When I see people click and they get who they are, it's magical.
yeah. I really like that. I mean, see yourself beyond the problems or the challenges that you are going through at the moment. I know from experience, it can be very difficult sometimes when you are in a very tight corner and maybe you are going through some pains. It can be very difficult to see beyond that situation. But I think it takes some effort for us to look beyond that to say, I am more than this current situation, this current moment that is maybe pulling me down or making me feel bad about myself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've discovered is that when people face challenges in their lives, they typically fall into four different categories.
Mm,
You can say four different personality types. The first one is the victim. And the victim is always like, why is this happening to me? Poor me.
Yeah.
as if it's only happening to them and not 8 billion other people, because every person has challenges, but that's besides the point. So that number one is the victim. The other one is the critic. And the critic, of course, criticizes, is angry, frustrated, mad, just all the time. They blame the government, they blame their boss, they blame their spouse, they blame their kids. They're to blame. And they're, miserable in a lot of ways because they're always frustrated and upset. The third personnel type, we kind of call them the bystander, basically somebody who's off to the side, who's really an observer of life, not living life, but feels so overwhelmed by life challenges and events and crises and so on. So in essence, they're frozen in fear. So they sit to the sidelines and they just kind of observe. They're not in the game of life, they're observing. And what all three of them have in common, of course, is that none of them move the needle forward to some positive outcome, right? Either it's poor me, I feel depressed, I'm down, or I get mad, or I'm afraid. Then we have the fourth personality type, which we like to call the navigator. And the navigator, of course, navigates life beautifully by doing certain things on a consistent basis. And navigators tend to be successful, tend to be happy, tend to be healthy, and so on. So the call to action for all of us is live life like a navigator, not as a victim, critic, or the fearful one. But here's the thing. It's not like, well, hey, Dr. Elia, you're the navigator, and no, it's not like that. All human beings, myself included, have all four of those personality types within ourselves. We all have. And so the key to success is, and it's normal to feel like a victim from time to time. It's normal to get afraid. It's normal to get upset even from time to time. What's not healthy, however, is to stay stuck. Oh, let's say you have some grievances towards your boss or the president of the country or whatever, Okay, express it. Do it for half an hour, not for half your life.
Mm.
And then move that energy and shift and pivot to become a navigator. From time to time you feel sorry for yourself. Yeah, it happens. We're all human beings and it happens. But I don't want to stay stuck in victim mode for the rest of my life, or even for the next 6 months, or even for the next 6 weeks. I wouldn't even do it for 6 hours, actually. Feel it, embrace it, feel your feelings, understand that, and then move on and pivot. And the quickest way, specifically about the victim, is because victims think this way: why is this happening to me? But if you were to change that and say, why is this happening for me? Now we have a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
If you think about why is this happening for me, not to me.
Yeah.
And, one of my role models, first of all, I believe that we're all graduates from the University of Adversity. No, think about it. The older you get, the higher your degree, because you face more adversity in life. So the question is, it's easy to be grateful when things are going well in life. That's the easiest thing in the world. I can write on my gratitude journal 3 different things every day for the rest of the year and never duplicate myself when things are going well. But how about when you're struggling? How about when you are facing some adversity? Is it possible to feel gratitude at the same time? And by the way, and this is my psychologist, that you cannot be in a grateful state and depressed simultaneously, physiologically. Because when you're in a grateful state, we have those beautiful chemicals that get released in our body. So we can't be depressed. So now begs the question, how about when we're facing challenges, can we still be grateful? And one of my role models is Nelson Mandela. I just love what he stood for and who he was and so on. He said something very profound and very wise years ago. He said, in life, either you win or you learn.
Yeah. Either you win or you learn.
You win or you learn, meaning that whatever, I can tell you, I've done some good things in my life, but the greatest lessons I've ever gotten have never come from my successes. They've always come from what at the time appeared to be setbacks, weaknesses, mistakes, human frailties. But when you look back and you say, I know why this happened for me, because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be the man that I am right now.
Very true.
Now, obviously, it's hard to do when you're going through it, obviously. But if we can have that perspective, not why it's happening to me and being a victim, but why it's happening for me, and look for the lessons, just like Nelson Mandela said, then there really are no mistakes in life, right?
That's true, yeah.
And then we can take all those experiences, all those human experiences, and say, I'm really actually grateful that these things happened. I didn't like them at the time, but now when I look back, I'm like, I know exactly why it happened and why it was so important that they happened to me, for me. See, I give me a cut myself. I said to me. It's like for me,
Well,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. That means no matter what kind of crisis we might be going through, no matter what kind of challenges we might be facing in life, we should look at it as a form of learning. Like it's an opportunity for us to become better, to maybe gain new insights to life, and maybe in the future it could help us to become better beings or to do things even in a much more better way or in a different way entirely. Yeah.
And also when we go through challenge, I think it helps us have empathy. I mean, my biggest challenge, of course, is when my mom died and losing she was the greatest person in my life. She was full of unconditional love and acceptance for everybody. My mom was beloved, not just loved, beloved by men and women because of who she was. But when I look back at that and say, you know what, that pain, the grief that I experienced when I was 22 years old, and, my life was never the same after that, helped me to become a better human, helped me to become a better psychologist, helped me to become better at my craft because I had empathy for people firsthand of what grief looks like, of what being sad looks like, or what being depressed looks like. I was able to, because I experienced it myself, to be able to be more kind and more loving and more empathetic towards those who came to see me for help. So even that experience, which is, one of the worst experiences that anybody can have, is to lose somebody so young. In some bizarre way, really actually helped me, shape me to become who I am.
Can you imagine that? Yeah. Wow. And I would like to ask you a question, like, thanks for sharing that. Like when after losing your mom and going through that phase of grief, were you able to hold on to happiness or were you able to choose happiness during that dark phase of your life?
That's really interesting that you're asking that question, because my mom's parting words before she died, her very last words to me were, and she's like, really within 48 hours, she died after that. She's like, she goes, my boy, he says, don't worry about me. Bedridden, right? I'm going to be just fine, which I thought it was like, I just want you to be happy. Those were her parting words to me. And then she died.
Wow.
So then, of course, for the first year after that, my older brother, dealing with his grief, he takes off. My dad, his major grief because he was in love with my mom, starts drinking even more. So my whole family imploded. Like I had the greatest family and it blew up. So for the first year, to be honest with you, I didn't want to get out of bed. Every morning it was like a struggle to get out of bed to go on. I used to like talk to God. I'm like, why did this happen to me? Of course, right? And losing my mom. And I'm like, man, if I can get hit by a bus today and I'm done, I'm good. Like I just wanted to be with my mom. I didn't want to, not that I would commit suicide, but I just didn't want to, I was in too much pain. I didn't know how to handle it. And I don't have a lot of support either. But something strange happened in the 1-year anniversary. And I remember this like it was yesterday, because every anniversary, of course, when you lose a loved one is a tough one, but the first anniversary is the hardest one. Her words came back to me, my boy, I just want you to be happy. And I made a decision. I'm like, you know what? The best way to honor my mom is to be happy. Me sitting here and being, sad, miserable, depressed, and so on. Okay, you've done it for a year. That's enough. And something clicked in me. And then I just began, a different phase in my life. I decided to go back to graduate school, get my PhD and my career and so on, and have a family. So I feel like my happiness is a direct result to some degree of her statement and her wish for me. And I'll tell you why that's important. I get an opportunity to travel the world and to speak about on this subject. And before I start my talks, I ask the audience, and I do this every single time, regardless of what country I'm in. And here's the question to you too.
Yeah.
If you were to ask any parent, regardless of ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, sexuality, religious affiliation, this question, what would you like for your children? What's the answer to that question? I just want them to be
happy.
That is always the answer, no matter where I go. So if we as parents want our children to be happy, that's the first thing we think about, happy and healthy. Shouldn't that also be the reason for ourselves to be happy? Since it's for our kids.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, happiness, as the great Greek Aristotle, great Greek philosopher, said 2,500 years ago, he said, happiness is the whole purpose and meaning of life.
Mm-hmm.
What a statement. The whole aim and end of human existence. That's what he said 2,500 years ago. And I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah, I mean that's a big goal to work towards. I mean, considering the kind of life
It is.
or life we live in right now, the world we live in right now, where you have different kind of news flowing about, waking up every morning and having a goal set ahead of you, saying today I decided to be happy no matter what. That's a big goal.
And Tobi, I think happiness is a choice, but it's also a skill set.
Mm.
Meaning, I choose to be happy every day, but it's also a skill set. And there's certain things that if we do them consistently will contribute to our happiness. We already talked about gratitude.
Yeah.
And especially in the middle of adversity, if you find the lesson. Self-care is a huge component towards one's happiness. And people say, well, isn't self-care selfish? And I'm like, yes, and do more. Yeah, I doubled down on that. Yes, yeah, and do more. So self-care, and for me, that's uncompromising, whether it's physically taking care of myself, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. I think there are other things that contribute to happiness. For example, self-forgiveness. Self-forgiveness is the ultimate act of self-compassion, right? Think about it. And, in my experience, especially when I was a psychologist in private practice and I saw thousands of people, a lot of them being addicts, at some point, they sober up and they have a year of sobriety and they're doing much better in their lives and so on. So we would have like let's call it a last interview in my office back here. They're sitting on the couch and I'm like, okay, Mary, use it as a fictional person. Do you feel like your kids have forgiven you? Yes. Do you feel like your spouse? Yes. Your parents? Yes. Your boss? Yes. 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 God? Yes. Have you forgiven yourself? You know what the best answer I've ever received? Not the
What's
most
it?
common, but the best answer was, I'm working on it.
Mm.
The most common answer was, no, I haven't. So we would have to work on people self-forgiveness. Because if you don't forgive yourself, first of all, it's really hard to forgive other people. That's number one. But the second thing is, anyone who doesn't forgive themselves is basically waking up every morning, they brush their teeth, they get ready they get dressed, and then they put a backpack on full of rocks that weigh 1,000 pounds, 100 pounds, a ton. Anything they haven't forgiven themselves, they carry with them in this invisible backpack. And that's how they go through life. And that gets really hard. So for me, I have a process that I take people through, and to teach them how to forgive themselves and in essence, to forgive others too. And it's not that hard of a process. It takes some work,
Yeah.
but that's how we do it.
Can you walk
I
us through the
coach people to
process?
forgive themselves.
Can you help us, go through that process so that we can learn how to embrace the strengths of forgiveness?
Can I go through this process with you right now about forgiveness? I can
Yes.
actually, yes.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
I'm going to talk to you then and I'm actually, this is one of my strengths. My wife says, like, you don't seem like you have any things you haven't forgiven yourself for. I'm like, I really don't. I don't have a backpack
Oh, that's good.
because I don't take myself seriously. That's one of the reasons.
That's good. That's
So,
difficult for me to do, but yeah, I like that. That's a goal for me.
yeah, I don't take myself seriously. That's one of the reasons why if I make a mistake, I'm like, okay, but did I learn from it? So remember, go back to Nelson Mandela, make a mistake, learn from it, move on.
Mhm.
So the process that I take people through, and I pretend that you and I are working together. I'm going to ask you, like, Tobi, I want you to write down in a piece of paper everything that you have not forgiven yourself for. It could be 5 things, 10 things, 20 things, or 50 things. I don't care how many it is. So just write them down, bullet points. Haven't, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you're done, I want you to put a number next to each one of those statements on a scale of 1 through 10. 10 is you actually murdered somebody. Like literally you killed somebody, like you killed another human being. That's a 10. A 1 would be you spilled some milk on yourself this morning all over your shirt. That's a 1. And then, so we want to put in some kind of hierarchy,
Yeah.
1 through 10. 1s, 2s, and 3s, those are the lowest hanging fruit. Those are easy to forgive, and then we go through it statement by statement. All right, Tobi, I know you spilled, milk on yourself at the restaurant and it was kind of embarrassing and people saw you and so on. How long are you going to hold on to this before you forgive yourself?
Deal of the evening.
Okay. So then we kind of go through the ones, twos, and threes, and slowly you begin to get momentum. You begin to practice the act of self-forgiveness, and it gets easier. The more we do, the easier it gets. Then we move on to the fours, fives, and sixes, kind of the middle stuff. And then we move on to the tougher things. Here's the funny thing that I discovered, though, in doing this, because I work with a lot of C-suite, like senior leaders in organizations, business owners, entrepreneurs, and so on, alpha males, like very successful, but like, kind of tough, very driven. The first time I had this with a CEO of a company, and I went through this exercise, he's looking at me, he goes, I don't want to do it that way. And I'm like, and I was kind of stunned. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's not how I want to do it. I'm like, well, how do you want to do it? He goes, I want to start with, and he didn't have any tens, but he had an 8, I want to start with the highest number first and forgive myself for that. And his point was, if I can forgive myself on this level, then I can forgive all the other ones. The other ones are easier, which is, I guess it's one way to do it.
Yeah.
For me, I was like, let's start with the easy stuff and then build some momentum, go to the other one. Frankly, I could care less which way you go, as long as you do the exercise. But it's interesting that specifically those alpha males, they start with the toughest thing first, and then they move down. When we do that exercise and we take the piece of paper, I actually light it up with a match and we burn it, and we release, the smoke up into the heavens. And when people walk out of my office, they're like, Dr. Elia, I feel like 1,000 pounds has been lifted off of me. I feel so light. I should have done that years ago. People say that consistently. I wish I had met you earlier in my life. I should have done this years ago. And I'm like, well, you know what? You did it now, at least. Now you're done.
Yeah.
But then once you go through this process, anything that comes up again, like I don't forgive myself for anything anymore, because there's nothing to forgive anymore, honestly. It's like, what's the lesson? Let me learn the lesson and let me move on. That's it.
Yeah. I think that the ability to not take yourself too serious and also to let go. Those are like two abilities that I myself I'm trying to learn also. Like, just let go, take the lessons and just move on. Yeah.
Yes. That's it. So self-forgiveness and forgiveness, that's a big part of it. I think knowing your purpose in life, like I said, for me, I learned that early on in my life, which is to make a difference, make a difference in people's lives. I think feeding your spiritual side, I think that's also important. Not from a religious perspective, but a spiritual, because I do believe we're not, physical beings that have, once in a while, we have a spiritual experience. I believe we're spiritual beings having a physical experience, whether that physical experience lasts for 20, 50, 80, or 100 years. But our spirit, I think, is eternal. So whatever we can do to feed our spirit, I think that's also vitally important.
That's true. I mean, I can
giving you
totally
5 out
relate
of
to that.
7 past the happiness. So the last couple more is kindness.
Yeah.
I feel like practicing kindness and on a daily basis, and not random acts of kindness, conscious, mindful, deliberate acts of kindness, like where you think about it to help other people. Because I think kindness and happiness are inseparable. First of all, happy people, because they practice self-care and their own batteries are full, they do acts of kindness all the time. It's natural and easy. On the flip side, and we know this through studies, that when we perform acts of kindness towards other people, those happy chemicals once again get released from our brain, right? And make us feel better. Okay. Because with kindness, everybody wins. The giver and the receiver. Right?
Yeah. I like that.
So,
with kindness, everyone wins. Yeah.
But it's true, right? So I feel like all of those things contribute to our happiness and our health. And the last part has to do with relationships. Because let's say we do all the things right. We practice self-care, express gratitude, we practice self-forgiveness, we know our purpose, we're kind to other people, we feed our spirituality. But if you surround yourself with toxic people, it can huge dent towards your health and happiness. It's very hard to try to maintain your own happiness when you're surrounded by toxicity, even if you do all these other things that I talked about. So my call to action, with people is, and I also teach people how to get rid of toxic relationships, and I have none. I have no toxic people in my life. I know that's a bold statement to make. Some people don't believe me, actually. I'm like, oh, there's no way. I'm like, believe me. I have many relationships. I have extended family, lots of friends. I love big. I show up big, but I don't put up with toxicity anymore. I used to,
Mm.
but it wasn't good for my health. So there's no more toxic people in my life. And then I teach people how to get rid of toxic people in their lives. That there's a process that I take them to. This is how you do it.
Mm. If there's like a point, I would like to learn that also, because I'm not like you. I'm sure I still have some toxic people in my life. So is there a way to identify them and also?
It's not that hard, Toby. I'm serious. It's not that hard.
Okay.
There's a specific process that you go through and you eliminate. So it starts with how you show up in your relationships. It always starts with us. It always starts with a man or woman in the mirror. And what do I mean about that? So let's take you and I, pretend like you and I have been friends for a long time, but there's some kind of, negativity in our relationship. I have to look in the mirror and say, how do I show up for Toby? And then assuming that I show up a certain way, then when I have the conversation with that toxic person, I'm like, Toby, for the most part, do I treat you with love, kindness, and respect? For the most part. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. So if the answer is yes, because I can't be an asshole to you and then expect you to be loving, kind, and respectful. That's not how it works. No. So that's why it starts with me. So that's why I ask you, do I treat you with love, kindness, and respect? And you said, yes, you do. I'm like, okay. So then, Toby, I expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect in return. Isn't that fair? Isn't that fair? Yes or no?
I mean, I might tell you that life is not fair. And what will you say?
Yeah, but I'm talking about our relationship. Do I treat you with love, kindness? How do I show up in us? If you said, yes, you do, then I expect you to do the same in return. And if you don't, and this is how you talk to people who are toxic in your life, and if you don't, here's the three options. Option number one, I'll cut you out of my life completely. There'll be you're out. Option number two, especially if it's a family member, because a lot of people, when I say that, it's like, well, Dr. Elia, what if it's a family member? And I'm like, of course it's a family member, at least one. Every family.
Yeah.
Yes. It goes, well, I can't cut people that are my family off. I'm like, no, perhaps you can't. But here's what you can do. And this is the conversation. We are going to have a very superficial relationship from now on, which is going to be like once a year, I'll say Happy New Year or Happy Birthday. And how's the weather in Frankfurt? That's it. We're going to have a very superficial level. If you want to have a deep and meaningful and loving relationship with me, that's how I want to have with you, then you need to show up differently. And I expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect, just like I treat you. And those are your options. Otherwise, we have zero relationship, we have a very superficial relationship, or we can have a very deep and profound and loving relationship. The choice is yours. Now, and then, of course, you have to, because people will test that. Initially, that sounds like, well, of course I want to be, loving, kind, and respectful. But they're not always going to be that way. And the first time it happens, I'm like, Toby, remember what I told you 6 months ago when we talked about that? You just did it again. So I'm going to distance myself from you for several months, and I want you to think about it. I'm all good about giving second and third chances, but if you don't change, do you follow football? Not American football, but European football.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Like soccer, okay. If someone misbehaves, you know what the ref does? Takes out a little card, yellow card.
That's true.
You're basically on probation. If the player continues to play hard football and so on, at some point, there's a red card that comes out. Yeah. Now you're out of the game. And you're suspended. Now, you're not suspended forever, but you certainly can't play in the next game or two. So that's the same thing with toxic people. Well, you just did it again. I warned you. I gave you a yellow card already 6 months ago. Now you did it again, red card. Yeah. Now I'll talk to you in 6 months and see if things can get better. And the people that truly love and care about you, they will show up without toxicity. I can't tell you how many people have said, if you hadn't talked to me like that, at first I was offended, that you said that to me. But then I realized what you were saying. And most people want to show up as their best selves. Most people don't get up in the morning and say, well, what can I do to ruin Elia's or Toby's life? Let me be an ass. Most people don't wake up like that. They just don't know how to behave better. And what you're saying to them is like, I'm mirroring the behavior by treating you with love, kindness, and respect. But now I expect you to do the same in return. And I'm not compromising that. I don't care if you're my mother, my sister, my guy. It doesn't matter who it is. As long as, but you have to show up a certain way first. That's the key. Yeah. Otherwise, we have no high moral ground to say, I expect you to treat me well if I'm not a good person towards you and disrespectful towards you, And that's how you do it. and it's powerful, and it's not easy to do. I call that hot communication, hot, H-O-T, which stands for honest, open, and transparent.
Honest, open, transparent.
Yeah, hot. Yeah, that's how we talk. And I talk to my kids that way. I talk to my wife. Like I talk to everybody. That's how I communicate.
Yeah.
And hopefully you do it from a place of love, not from a place of like, well, let me be brutally honest with you, Tobi, and then hit you with a 2x4. That doesn't work because people usually get defensive about that. But if you come from a place of love, say, look, I do want to have a relationship with you. I just don't want to have a toxic one. What can we do about that? Most people actually step up.
That's true.
And those are your 7 paths to happiness, my friend. You got all 7 of them. There you go.
Thank you so much for sharing all the 7. Yeah, I mean, I really love what you just talked about right now. I mean, being able to stand firm, know who you are. Like, you are fair to this person, then you expect fairness back. That's what is expected. And then when that's not coming, be honest, be open, be transparent in your discussion, and come from a place of love. Yeah. And if they refuse to see you the way you see yourself, then it's better to part ways.
You got to bring the red card. Red card. You're done for a couple of games.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's true. I'd just like to ask one more question to that. When it comes to relationship with ourselves, with our family, with our friends, loved ones, what's the place of emotional intelligence in this when it comes to managing our emotions? Also, when a partner hurts us, or a family member did something in some ways to us, what's the place of emotional intelligence?
Well, I think the beautiful thing about emotional intelligence, and I used to teach that in corporations actually. So EI for me is a big component to. It starts with self-awareness, right? I mean, that's the number one thing for EI. So we have to be aware of ourselves. We have to be aware of our strengths, but we also have to be aware a little bit of our dark side. We have to be aware of we have to live openly, I believe, authentically. We have to own our stuff. When we make a mistake or when we say something, it's like, be quick to apologize and say, hey, you know what? I was not my best self when I know it's kind of short with you on the phone, and you didn't deserve that. I was having a bad day, no excuse, and I'm here to apologize to you for that. So you also learn how to manage your emotions, right? And because I think most people, if you were to approach them that way, they would forgive you in an instant. If I were to say to you, say, I know yesterday when we spoke, I kind of hung up. I was kind of like, you didn't deserve that. You didn't do anything wrong. It was me. I was having a tough day and I was kind of short with you, and I'm sorry. I hope you forgive. What person wouldn't say, I do forgive you? Of course. Thanks for telling. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
So let's own our stuff, and let's not be afraid. The only people that don't own their stuff are people who come from their ego space, not from their heart. And I'm all about heart space, not ego. Where's your, people talk about mindset, and mindset is important. You have a winning mindset and have a strong, yes, mindset is important, but it's not the most important. What's more important than a mindset is your heart set.
Your heart set.
Where's your heart set? I know that, I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm making it up, but heart set,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your mindset and your heart set. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Because your heart doesn't lie to you. Your heart, if you learn to listen to your heart, learn to listen to your intuition, learn to listen to your higher self, get really quiet, taking it quiet, and then come from that space, then you live a beautiful life.
Yeah. I'm taking that home with me from this episode. Like, always live from your heart set.
Yes.
Get rid of ego and listen to your heart. Listen to your heart. Wow. Elia, I've learned so much from you in this conversation. There's so much more to learn from you. But I would just like you to share with us the best way we could get across to you, the best way we could get your book, the best way people out there could also work with you.
Yeah, the best way to connect with me is dreliagourgouris.com. That's my website. You can see everything there. My books are both on Amazon, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness and 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. And on LinkedIn, that's probably the best way. I think LinkedIn or Instagram, those are the best ways to find me. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I would love to connect with as many people as possible. I'm very open and I return messages fairly promptly. Thanks for having me on your show. This was such a pleasure. Thanks, Tobi.
It was a blessing for me just sitting out here learning from you. I learned so much, so many things I'm going to use, I'm going to apply to my life to make myself much more happy, or make myself happier, basically, and become a much more better being. I really appreciate this conversation.
I appreciate it too. Thank you for having me.
Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your day? If you're loving the insightful conversations and captivating stories on Mirror Talk Podcast, here's a friendly nudge to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the empowering messages and thought-provoking discussions we bring to your ears. But wait, there's more. We're all about spreading positivity and inspiration, and you can be a part of it too. How? By sharing the love with your friends and family. Share this episode with your loved ones, and let's create a ripple effect of empowerment and growth together. And hey, if you've been enjoying what you hear, why not take a moment to leave us a glowing 5-star review? Your feedback fuels our passion to keep delivering content that resonates with you. So hit that subscribe button, share the love, and leave us a review. Let's keep the conversation going and spread the Mirror Talk magic far and wide. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, your support means the world to us.